It's time for my favorite position in this year's draft. Let's go to the most fun, in my opinion, the most fun position in this draft for sure, and that's the wide receiver. So let's start out with kind of the super elites here, and we'll kind of trickle down from there. So let's start out with everyone's beautiful golden boy, Marvin Harrison Jr. Ryan, is he all that he's cracked up to be?
I think so. And I'm looking at his last year, and he had different quarterbacks. In 2022, he had CJ Stroud, and in 2023, he had Kyle McCord. There really wasn't that much of a difference in his stats. He did catch 10 less balls, but he was only about 52 yards away from what he had in 2022. He had the same amount of touchdowns. He did have a few more drops, and that may just be to having McCord as your quarterback. But I mean, this guy is everything you want him to be. I mean, he doesn't have the type of game breaking type of speed that Nabers has. And that's fine. I mean, but Harrison is just like, you look at the tape the last 2 years, it's just like, man, this guy is so freaking good. And last year during Ohio State's pro day, they were looking at him like, wait, can this guy go into the draft now? And listen, I'm sure there would have been a team that would have run up to the podium last year and taken him in the top 10. It's like, I don't care if he only has one true year of production. We're taking him. And he's wide receiver 1. So yes, I
Ryan,
think he's everything. He is.
in my life, you are Mr. College Football. And I love the fact that you mentioned there of like, what if he was draft eligible a year ago? Because we're going to play that game. All right. Are you ready for this? We're going to play a game called Marvin Harrison Jr. or. So first things first here, let's get the easy answer out of the way. Marvin Harrison Jr. or anybody from last year's class?
I'm taking Marvin.
At the time of drafted. So I need you to go back in the Rolodex here a little bit. Use your brain power here. I believe in you. Marvin Harrison Jr. or Devonta Smith?
Or Devonta Smith.
He went 10th overall.
I would take Marvin.
Marvin? Marvin Harrison Jr. or Jalen Waddle, who went 6th overall that year?
I love Jaden. I love Jalen. He brings that extra speed element. I'm taking the true X receiver. I'm taking Marvin.
All right, Ryan. I hope you have the talent already because this one's gonna hurt. Marvin Harrison Jr. or draft time Jamar Chase?
Man. Really making me think on this one. I mean, I think as far as if we're looking as far as production wise, I mean, Jamar, he really didn't play his final year there.
Right,
but, man. Yeah. I think everybody was sold as just like, this guy is just that freaking good.
I know.
I feel like. And I feel like Marvin's the only other guy, like he and Jamar are in this recent tier of guys where it's just like, these guys are going to be bona fide stars at the next level.
Yeah.
Man. Oh, man.
I actually just realized I accidentally skipped the entire 2022 class. The Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. Like I forgot. I double tapped the button and I skipped past that whole class. I'm with you though, Ryan. You know what? I'm gonna let you off easy. You don't have to choose. But because I think the point, because I think you made the point though, the fact that like it's kind of easy of him over Devonta Smith, and like it's kind of easy him over Jalen freaking Waddle. These two guys are studs. It's not even a choice in choosing between Marvin Harrison Jr. versus those two guys. And so I think that alone makes the point. He's in that Jamar Chase tier. If I would have said him versus anybody in the 2022 class, it's a pretty easy also. It's him over those guys.
Yeah.
This is that super mega elite tier guy that we just don't see every year. I think moving on down to Malik Nabers, he is in that number 1 tier that's more realistic. Like if I said Malik Nabers or a draft day moment Garrett Wilson, you're going to have to think about that one for a little bit. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, you'll have to think about it. I made this point on views. It's crazy because we had this pedigree recently of all these LSU Ohio State receivers, and here we got both from the same school this year. So it's just like, man, if only there was like a Alabama receiver coming out that was
Right?
on that level. It's just like, man, you would have been like, okay, we'll take the third guy. I don't care, if he's from Bama, LSU, or Ohio State. But
Jermaine Burton,
Neighbors,
why aren't you better?
well, listen, I'm glad he's not. Okay, there's some Tennessee reasons behind that. I wanted to bring up Tennessee reasons with Spencer Rattler, but we're not going to bring that up because that involved having some PTSD from a game that happened a couple years ago. But no, yeah, Malik Nabers. I think I still might take him because you take a look at how explosive and how dynamic he is. Man, it's just like incredible, just like how quick he can turn on a dime and just make plays. And that's not to say Garrett Wilson can't do that. I think just Malik himself has more explosive playmaking ability. I think as far as explosiveness, he there he's on that path with Waddle, even though Waddle I think is probably he's faster, he's more explosive, but he's close. He's close. And Neighbors is not a small guy. I mean, he's a little bit he's under 200 pounds, but he's around 6 foot. He's got a little bit of height to him. So man, he's gonna be 21 here soon.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah.
And like you said, he's just so explosive. He's a little shorter than this comparison I'm gonna make, but it is, I think, a worthwhile comparison of Marvin Harrison Jr. reminds me a lot of AJ Green, where it's just like big, physical, dominating guy. Malik reminds me a little bit of Julio Jones. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that 2011 draft class. Julio was bigger though, so it's not quite a perfect 1-to-1.
Yeah.
Julio had probably about 3 or 4 inches on Neighbors. But Julio definitely more of an explosive style guy, right? Uses speed, uses footwork, and what's lethal after the catch that AJ Green never was. That's kind of how I view these two guys. Malik Nabers is awesome after the catch. That's kind of one thing that I would like to see more of with Marvin Harrison. I feel like Marvin Harrison's a bit more of that stereotypical big alpha receiver who maybe isn't great after the catch, but he catches everything, right? And he catches it contested, he catches it wide open, he gets open, like he's just that dude. By no means is this a knock on Marvin. It's just a plus for Malik Nabers that he's so good after the catch. I kind of view it a little bit like that, and I think those two guys, they went 4th and 6th overall. That could be the future that we see for these two guys. All right, Ryan, I'm going to put you to the feet of the fire here again. I'm going to make you make some choices here. So Marvin Harrison Jr., Ryan, this just in. Marvin Harrison Jr. went 3rd overall to New England. Okay? And in round 2, they drafted Bo Nix. Okay? But Malik Nabers got drafted by the Chargers. Who would you rather put on your dynasty fantasy football team?
Can I say neither?
Oh, you want neither over both?
I'm leaning that way because
okay.
I if I had to make a choice, it would be Neighbors to the Chargers because he got Herbert and he got the big arm. But Nix with Harrison, like, and we just talked
again. Nix, it could be they stick with Bailey Zappi first. We could go with that if you'd like.
Yeah, I feel like if anything, I would like it Penix to the Patriots over Nix because I feel like Penix, he's got that ability to have that.
Caught up in the quarterback there. That was just a placeholder for the example. Don't get too caught up in the quarterback. That we're focusing on the wide receiver here.
But listen, if you give me those two options, I'm like, I'll pass.
So that's interesting. Because I'm kind of with you. I think the Chargers is not a great landing spot for a wide receiver. A lot of people think it is because you get Justin Herbert. I'm nervous about it. Like if Neighbors lands in LA, which I think is possible, but not to me, it's not likely. To me, it's likely they go with Joe Alt, the tackle. I think that the offense there just does not fit for a wide receiver to have a mega year, right? With Greg Roman at OC, I know this pretty darn well. I've got some Baltimore Ravens stuff behind me. It's just not going to be great for the wide receivers. And maybe it's because he never had a quarterback like Herbert. He never had a receiver like Nabers. But, man, it'd just be really hard for me to trust it if he lands with the Chargers. Also, landing with the Giants is not my favorite thing in the world either. And that brings me along here to Rome Odunze, Ryan. If he lands with the Giants, I'm not in love with that either. How would you feel about that fit?
I like it a little bit more, and you know this. I like it because he is more of that X wide receiver mold that the Giants currently lack. I mean, you take a look at those guys. You got Sterling Shepard, Wandale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, and listen, I love Jalen, but dude's not big. And Rome has got some size on him. He's 6'2", 6'3", well over 210. He brings that true ability of an X wide receiver that can go and make plays. But the quarterback situation, that can give you some kind of pause right there. And you know what? Maybe Giants are just like, we'll find a way to take Penix, and we'll make sure that Rome succeeds because we saw how it worked in college. But I could see why, if that's the reason, then I'm with you on that because I'm scared with those receivers with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, totally. And I do think the best case scenario here for sure for Harrison is land with the Cardinals, right? Put Kyler Murray as his quarterback and just let him cook, right? So I feel pretty good. Like, I think New England's going to go quarterback, right? So I feel pretty good about Marvin Harrison landing with Arizona. The other two guys, I'm having a hard time seeing landing spots I'm actively really excited about. The Giants one for Rome is a pretty good fit because, like you said, he brings something different to the offense. I have a hard time seeing – I mean, the other guys to at the top of the board, Ryan, let me know. Stop me if this is a team where you look at and say that's a really good fit for one of these wide receivers to have immediate rookie of the year type of success. Again, LA Chargers, New York Giants, your Tennessee Titans, Atlanta Falcons, Chicago Bears, New York Jets, Minnesota Vikings, Denver Broncos, Las Vegas Raiders, New Orleans Saints, Indianapolis Colts, Seattle Seahawks, Jacksonville Jaguars. That's the one, right?
Yeah, Jacksonville's the one, I think.
Like, if the Jags move up for one of these guys, I'll be real excited. The rest of these teams, that's pick 17. So you're looking at a lot of teams where it's pretty plausible to move up, right? Like, once you get – it's hard to move up in the NFL draft when you're too far out with your first pick, right? Like, you have to give up a lot to do it. Jacksonville's probably the one. Is the Jets, I guess, the second best landing spot for one of these guys in the teens of teams?
Maybe.
I guess, if Mike Williams isn't ready to go and you get to be the number 2 behind Garrett Wilson, you get to have Aaron Rodgers for his final rodeo.
And that's a good possibility because we know Mike Williams' injury history.
Yeah. And like New Orleans, you get to be the number 2 behind Olave. Okay. That's not so bad, but like not so bad. I'm not real thrilled about most of these wide receiver landing spot possibilities here. And that makes me a little bit queasy on if, let's say the Chargers don't take one. Let's say the Giants take Malik Nabers. For Rome, I'm looking around saying I don't totally love your possibilities here. I'm going to need Jacksonville, I think, to be the team that moves up and come to get you. Maybe the Saints, but I don't know if Rome and Olave are a real good pairing. I think you're just kind of you're covering first base twice then, when you probably need to get yourself a shortstop. And so a lot of those spots, I don't totally love. But let's go back to the players here. Let's move on. Well, you talked a little about Rome. Let's move on here to the kind of – do you agree those three are kind of definitive top 3 tier of wide receivers?
Yes, without doubt. Yeah.
And now, Ryan, I know in your mock, you had a pretty big drop from wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 4. I think most of us pretty much agree with that. By ADP and by most sources, most things you look at, Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, he is most people's wide receiver 4. I think this is where wide receiver gets real interesting because there's a whole lot of guys who I think kind of live in this like mid first round to like mid second round range. And I think kind of like we talked about with running backs, landing spots can be super important. And whoever has the landing spots that we like, that's probably going to get a lot of lenience. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's just kind of like, which type of receiver do you like? Which type do you want? What kind of fits into your offense at the moment? So, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of variety with those guys outside the top 3 where you can see the team go with somebody other than, like you said, the projected wide receiver 4, Brian Thomas. And there's like, okay, we can see why they went with that because, they did X, Y, and Z, not to make a wide receiver kind of thing there with X, Y, and Z, but, yeah, it feels like there's a lot of variety after those 3 guys. We're like, okay, I can see why a team goes with Lad McConkey as the 4th overall receiver off the board, or Xavier Worthy or AD Mitchell.
So let's talk about those guys here. And I tell you, I'm going to go ahead and throw you pick which one we talk about first. Let's talk about your favorite one first here. Between Brian Thomas, Lad McConkey, Troy Franklin, and Xavier Worthy. Who do you want to talk about first?
Well, you know what? Al Davis is inspiring me here, so let's talk about Xavier Worthy.
Xavier Worthy, so Mr. 40-yard dash over here, ran the fastest time of all time. I've compared it a lot to Hollywood Brown, and that still is who I see. Maybe he's a couple tenths of a second faster than Hollywood Brown, but that just means you're Hollywood Brown. I think that's really, really good, though. Like, Hollywood's awesome. I love Hollywood. And, of course, him going to Kansas City took away my favorite landing spot for Xavier Worthy because I wanted him to go link up with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Tell me, what do you like? What do you like about Xavier Worthy?
Well, I mean, obviously he is fast. He's crisp and he's got a lot of versatility. He can be in the punt game too. So if you want him to be involved in that, then you get him in that. But as far as there are some weaknesses. The weight is an issue. We bring up guys like Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. That was something that's brought up with them. He's completely
though.
That is true. So he's a little bit slender. He's got a thin body type. Doesn't make a lot of contested catches.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to keep an eye on. I mean, that's not something with just his weight, but just like he's like 5'10", or 5'11". Sorry, I shaved off an inch for him. So, but I mean, yeah, I do like what he brings in offense. Can bring some explosive plays, and if there's somebody like Mike Titans who wants to get a little bit more explosive, I'm not going to knock it because it can go well with the quarterback that has a big arm. But as far as, him, I think I really just like him because of his speed. And he did have consistent production at Texas. He was consistent. He was good all 3 years. His sophomore year, a little bit of a drop off, only 760 yards. But freshman year, he caught 12 touchdowns, 981 yards. So he was productive right away. And his junior year, went over 1,000 yards. But he's also got some drops now. In 3 years, he did have 15 drops, and in his sophomore year, he did have 7 drops. So that's something to keep in mind too. Is that going to be something that's an issue there? Is the drops, and it would have been a well-made fit with Kansas City as far as the speed and the drops with their receivers last year, at least.
A 1-for-1 replacement for about 4 of their different guys. Where is your favorite landing spot for him? Where do you want to see him go?
Where do I want to see Xavier Worthy go? I mean, oh man. Again, if Al Davis was here, I mean, the Raiders would have been unlocked, but unfortunately, he isn't. So can't do that. I think the Saints could be a decent option. Bring some explosiveness to that offense. I think
he would be really fun.
I don't think. I think so. I feel like the Saints need protection first with offensive line. Then they go
Sure.
and grab a running back for Olave. And I think Worthy can be that guy that can take the top off, and which, for Derek Carr, let's hope this guy stays on the field, unlike with what happened with Vegas with Henry Ruggs, So I feel like that's a good spot. Man, Kansas City just would have been the number one spit.
I know, right?
It just would have been. It would have been perfect, but the Saints, I feel like, are mine. Maybe you can throw the Panthers in there because they got a wide receiver need, or maybe it's just one of those other guys fits a little bit better.
Well, you haven't said the free spot yet. Buffalo.
Buffalo was on the mind. I think I would take one of the bigger guys like Thomas or Mitchell or Franklin and take those.
That's totally fair. I agree with that, actually, because they don't need to replace Gabe Davis. They need to replace Stephon Diggs, right?
Yes.
So let's talk a little Brian Thomas now. He's most people's wide receiver 4. I don't totally love Brian Thomas. I prefer everybody else we're going to talk about in this episode over Brian Thomas. But, the buzz is there. He's projected mid-first round by everybody. How are you on Brian Thomas?
Well, I mean, you don't doubt LSU receivers if there's anything that the last few years have taught us, They turn out to be more often than not to be pretty good. Brugler has something in his little summary here that kind of says it has the upside of T. Higgins. And I feel like if we take a look at where the draft T. Higgins was in, I feel like in a redraft, he would probably go in the first round.
Yeah.
And so I kind of see that kind of career path for Thomas. And listen, for T. Higgins, we just want him to stay healthy,
Yeah.
I ran into that problem last year with my team. It's just like this guy was not on the field, and I've got no inclination that that's something that's a concern with Thomas at all. So if you're getting him at a T. Higgins level, but he's going to be playing more often than not, I would definitely take him as wide receiver 4 in this draft. But he did only have that 1 year production last year. So that's something to keep in mind. He's also not the biggest guy. He has only 209. You probably would want him to add a few more pounds to him, but he's a big target. He's got that size beast combo that teams I think will absolutely love at that next level. If it's the Bills, then yeah, I think they would definitely take him, run to the podium.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to say. Watching his videos, I don't love the way he catches the football. Like, you know what I mean, though? Like it's kind of a lot of body catches. I feel like he's kind of always turned in a weird way to me. Like, I just don't love the way he actually catches a football.
Hey, maybe that's on Jane Daniels.
And maybe it is. I want to turn the page over here to a guy who I love the way he catches the football, Ryan. This is he's not my number 1 wide receiver because that would be ridiculous, but he is my favorite wide receiver in this draft. And he is my wide receiver 4. And he's the guy who I am really going to try to do my darndest to walk out of every rookie draft with this year. And that is the young lad McConkey. Out of Georgia. I love this kid. I thought he was such a little just spark plug out there. And then it turns out he goes to the combine. He's bigger than I thought he was. He's faster than I thought he was. He blew my pants off watching him do the gauntlet. I literally had hard eyes emojis. I felt like I was watching Mike Trout hit a baseball, watching Lad McConkey run the gauntlet at the combine. Like, it was just wonderful. Are you going to burst my bubble? How do you feel on Lad McConkey?
Well, maybe at this rate, Lad should probably go play for your Angels at this point.
He'd be the 3rd best player on the team, and he doesn't even play baseball.
Lad is a very quarterback friendly, offensive friendly type of wide receiver. It felt like no matter what, he was able to make plays. You're like, man, how do you leave this guy open? He just had that knack of finding ways to get open and make you saying like, oh, well, of course he finds a way to get open. He did play a whole lot in the slot. And so I feel like that's probably where his he's going to be playing most out of. Looking at what he did at Georgia, he honestly, I'm kind of surprised to look at this. 70% of his snaps came out wide.
Yeah.
Only around 30 came in the slot, but I feel like he is more of a slot guy because you take a look at his height and his weight, only 186. He apparently has had trouble adding weight. It's been a challenge for him. So I don't know. And he's also got a short, his catch radius isn't that great. But just like what he's able to bring to a football field, I feel like teams are going to love him. They're going to love adding him to their system. So I'm not going to knock you for it. Yeah, and Ladd is one of those guys. I'm kind of like, okay, seeing college football and seeing him play Tennessee and just like being able to make play after play against my Vols, I'm with you on Ladd. I'm with you. I think he's going to be a productive pro. I think he's going to make a quarterback. He's going to make a coach really happy when they take him.
Yeah. And Ryan, it's funny. Me and you have been talking NFL draft since the 2017 NFL draft, I guess it's been now. That many now. And I think the thing that my own personal philosophy has changed the most on is wide receiver size. I used to be right there where a guy who is a $185, I kind of want nothing to do with, right? If you're under 6 foot, maybe you're Hunter Renfrow when you get lucky, you can be a little slot guy. But as the league has kind of shrunk itself down, I'm more open to these kinds of guys. And it's part of, I learned a bit of a lesson last year being kind of out on Tank Dell. I wasn't real thrilled with the Ravens drafting Zay Flowers as part of that, right? And I've become more open to over the last few years. I think now I'm fully opened up on it, is that size doesn't matter as much as it used to. These teams are really, really good at scheming good route runners and getting these guys open with their feet if they can be, and finding ways to use them. Like you said, Ladd running so many routes outside, because that was one thing that blew me away too when I watched him on some YouTube videos, is like, I kind of thought, okay, it's a white dude, right? Like, yeah, I know what to expect here, right? Like, okay, I've seen people say on Twitter, oh, he reminds me of Cooper Kupp. Like, okay, he's going to be his Julian Edelman. He's going to be this little short area target guy, like, whatever. And then I watched it, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait, this guy's just, like, beating people on the outside. I'm like, he is a real outside wide receiver. And that has me really, really excited for what he can be. He's probably going to be a early round 2 pick, you think? Or you think he can sneak into the late first?
I've had him sneak into the late first in a couple of my later mocks. I've had him going to Kansas City.
Oh, God. That's less fun now than what it would have been before Hollywood. I don't want to bury it on the depth chart too far, but, I think my own personal dream is the 49ers trade away Brandon Ayuk and they draft Ladd McConkey. That's like my own like hysteria over here. That's what I'm really pulling for. Let's move on here let's do one more wide receiver who I like quite a bit here. Let's do Troy Franklin. He's a little bit of a skinnier guy again, but he's a fast guy. He's not a great route runner, but I think that he can still win a little bit. How do you feel on Troy Franklin?
Yeah, Troy is a guy that has as tall as a long athlete, somebody you like to see outside, has that long speed. But yeah, is a little bit slender. Something you look at in this Oregon offense, it feels like it could be Chris Nix, it's just like a whole lot of quick stuff. There's a reason why Bo's completion percentage was so high. And I feel like Troy maybe had a part of that. And I look at his last season, 9 drops. That's okay. That's a little bit something to be concerned about as he heads into the NFL. But last year, besides that, was great. And I feel like he needs to be more of a wide receiver too. I feel like he lines up with more of a wide receiver 2 than like a wide receiver 1. Now, if he's able to add some weight and it doesn't affect his play style, then great. But I feel like he more so lines up as a wide receiver 2 type of guy in a NFL offense.
Do you think Gabe Davis is what his future is destined to be? Maybe Tyler Lockett if he's lucky.
Yeah, Gabe Davis. Yeah, Gabe Davis type of career, and then in a few years he'll head to Jacksonville unless he's selected by Jacksonville in the draft.
Oh gosh, if they have him and Gabe on the same roster, just like you two go deep, and we're gonna just actually throw it to Christian Kirk 1,000,000 times.
I'm sure
So,
Christian
Ryan-
Kirk will love that.
Oh, absolutely. And as a Christian Kirk guy, I would love that too. I'm going to rank those 4 guys we just talked about here. Ladd McConkey, Troy Franklin, Xavier Worthy, and Brian Thomas. Rank those 4 guys.
Okay. I'll take Thomas. I think
Okay.
I'm more so on him than you are.
Yeah.
I'll take Ladd.
Okay.
I'll take Troy because while the weight thing is something to keep an eye on, he's tall and he's fast. That's something that you can't ignore. And I'll take Worthy 4th.
So Troy's
even
tall.
Though I really like Worthy.
So Troy is tall and fast, but Xavier is short and fast. So that's kind of the tiebreaker there.
Yeah.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I go Ladd McConkey and then Xavier Worthy, Troy Franklin, Brian Thomas for me. I think it's definitely a bit hot takey for me having Brian Thomas be last among that group. Like I said, I just did not like his technique on Sting. Like, I don't know. It was just something really weird to me about watching him versus the others. I just felt more confident, felt better about. I have a hard time kind of really describing what it was with Brian Thomas I didn't like so much. But that's kind of the tier 2 of wide receivers, the guys behind the big 3. So that's all kind of the elite chunk of wide receivers. So those are the elite wide receivers. That's the top of this class. These are all the ones that we really expect to be in rounds 1, early round 2. These are the guys we're super excited about. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about the rest of the rookies at wide receiver this season. So be sure to come right back here to check out that episode as well.